In 1977, the world was changed forever with the release of Star Wars, or as it would later be known, Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope. People were blown away by the visuals, the sound effects, the lore, the world building, and the characters. Darth Vader was a fairly surface level, yet imposing and effective villain. I was nowhere near alive yet, almost 20 years away, but I have to imagine people weren't even sure there was going to be another Star Wars movie, let alone Vader would end up becoming one of the best and most complex fictional characters ever created. The Empire Strikes Back is what really took him to the next level, and Return of the Jedi solidified him as, at the time, probably the greatest movie villain of all time. Say what you will about the way Anakin was written and performed in the prequels, but the larger storytelling was fantastic. He had a great character arc, and they fleshed him out even more. Darth Vader committed countless atrocities, there is no getting away from that, and was one of the most feared people in the galaxy. But what makes him such a great character is his complexity, his tragic story, and the empathy we feel for him. We spend 6 movies with this character, and those movies span decades. Let's dive deep into all of the things that make Anakin Skywalker one of the greatest fictional characters ever created, making our way through his life, and all of the important moments and relationships within it. I will mainly be focusing on the original 6 movies with a little bit of the Clone Wars micro-series thrown in there. That isn't to say that there is no other good material out there. There is, but it just isn't really my wheelhouse. Let's get to it. Spoilers for the prequel trilogy, the original trilogy, and the Clone Wars micro-series. Anakin Skywalker was born 41 years before the Battle of Yavin on the desert planet of Tatooine and grew up a slave. He was born to a single mother, Shmi Skywalker, and it is commonly theorized that Anakin was conceived by the midichlorians themselves, possibly due to the meddling of Sith Lords Darth Plagueis and Sidious. Having the highest midichlorian count ever seen, Anakin was extraordinarily naturally gifted and demonstrated those gifts early on, particularly in the realm of piloting and building and fixing things, skills he would take with him into his life as a Jedi. At such a young age, he was not only able to pilot a pod racer, but do so to a victory and build a protocol droid from scratch. He had a very close relationship with his mother, the only real relationship he had at the time, and leaving her at age 9 to go train to be a Jedi was extremely difficult for him. He was made aware of how gifted he was, and that put a ton of pressure on him, pressure he was clearly not capable of handling. Kids who become Jedi are normally taken at a much younger age, so that they haven't really formed any attachments, and they can essentially start from scratch. The fact that Anakin was old enough to have formed a real relationship with his mother that he will remember made him a rare and dangerous case. That was a big reason why the Jedi Council did not want to train him initially. You can certainly see their logic, though their teachings and methods themselves were extremely flawed, not taking into consideration the fact that not everyone is the same and not everyone should be taught the same, and that emotions are natural, that they should be embraced and understood rather than suppressed. Plus, I don't think anything would have changed if they refused to train him. If anything, Palpatine probably would have gotten to him even sooner. One of the few Jedi that did understand this was Qui-Gon Jinn, who discovered Anakin and, despite the limited amount of time they had together, left a lasting impression on him. Qui-Gon was the only one who truly understood Anakin and talked to him as if he were an actual human being with human emotions. In fact, had Qui-Gon survived the battle on Naboo and lived to be Anakin's master, I firmly believe that Anakin would have never gone to the dark side. There were many factors that drove Anakin into Palpatine's arms, including, of course, Palpatine himself, but the Jedi played a massive role as well. They were so set in their ways and had no idea how to handle Anakin. Obi-Wan had many virtues, but was the wrong choice to be Anakin's master. He was not ready to be a teacher, and they were too close in age, butting heads constantly. Had Qui-Gon still been around and been the one to train Anakin, he would have had the perfect approach to help Anakin become the great Jedi that he could have been. I honestly don't think anyone else, at least in that current version of the Jedi Council, would have been able to do that. Anakin looked up to Qui-Gon and was clearly bitter that he never got to train under him. I've always found it so fascinating that Duel of the Fates had multiple meanings, not only deciding Qui-Gon's fate, but also, and much more importantly when it comes to the ramifications on the galaxy, Anakin's fate as well. Having to leave his mother at a young but old enough age to have formed a real attachment to her continued to haunt Anakin throughout his days as a Jedi, something the Council worried about. Literally, the very next time he saw her was the last, as she died in his arms after being captured and tortured by Tusken Raiders. Was massacring an entire village of Tuskens wrong? Of course. Is it understandable, especially given his background and emotional nature, that he would do that? Absolutely. Something Qui-Gon definitely could have prevented. He even warns Anakin against those actions from the afterlife, but to no avail. Anakin! No! We have to remember that at this point in time, Anakin had formed his second big attachment, of course being Padme, first since his mother, but he had literally just been denied by her mere days before this transpired. His mother was the only person up until this point that truly cared about him and loved him. Imagine seeing that person for the first time in 10 years, only to have to watch them die. That changes a person, especially a person not properly equipped for a tragedy like this. Speaking of not properly equipped, let's talk about Anakin's deepest and most important relationship, that being Padme Amidala. Anakin met Padme as a kid, and she was essentially his first and only crush ever. Like his mother, he didn't see her for 10 years while he was off training with the Jedi. We know that Anakin is prone to forming attachments, his first being his mother. Padme coming back into his life, in some ways at least, was sort of a replacement. He even says,
"I'd much rather dream about Padme."
Of course, the types of feelings are different, but the general idea of having someone to be close to remains. Anakin, for so long, feared losing his mom. That happened, he reacted poorly to it, then almost immediately after, Padme confesses her feelings for him, then of course his new fear is losing her, especially after the dreams began, the same ones that he had about his mother right before she died. Anakin had a clear fear of loss and abandonment, which is why he held so tightly onto whatever and whoever he did have. If only the Jedi taught him anything besides stuff it down, let it go, maybe he would have had a chance. On the flip side, Palpatine was aware of all of this and played on this knowledge brilliantly, manipulating Anakin by taking advantage of those fears.
Power to save Padme.
The fear of losing Padme, just like he lost his mother, is what ultimately led Anakin to the dark side. What's extra messed up is Anakin going bad is actually what led to Padme's death. Had he just stayed a Jedi, everything would have turned out fine. I never agreed with the criticism that his turn was rushed, poorly written, or unearned. I'll expand on that a little bit more later. But this feels like a good time to transition into the way Anakin was written and performed in the prequel trilogy, a center for controversy and one of the biggest criticisms of the trilogy. I am here to mostly defend it. I'm not going to talk too much about Jake Lloyd. He was a kid at the time and has gotten so much crap from toxic fans. Leave the kid alone. He did his best. I will be mainly focusing on Hayden Christensen and the second two movies in the trilogy. One of the biggest criticisms of the prequels is that Hayden was miscast, his performance was terrible, particularly in Attack of the Clones, and that his dialogue was horribly written. Now, I love George Lucas. He's a brilliant mind, and no one measures up to his ability to build out worlds and lore, but I'm not here to defend his dialogue. That has always been an issue for him. The great Harrison Ford once said, "You can write this stuff, George, but you can't say it." However, I think Hayden was a great choice for the character. I will defend him till the day I die, and I think the character was purposely written to be that way. Think about it. This is a guy who had a short but not forgotten childhood. He was taken from his mom at age 9, told he's the Messiah, loses the one Jedi who could have been a good mentor to him, gets treated like a robot by everyone else, is essentially taught to act like a robot, suppress emotions, let go of your feelings, instead of being taught how to properly confront and deal with those emotions. The love of his life comes back into his life after 10 years. How do you think he would handle this? Should he be smooth, confident, and charismatic? No, that wouldn't make sense. Wooden, awkward, insecure? That makes sense. He has no idea what he is doing. Even the "I don't like sand" line which has become a meme, makes total sense for him to say, given his experiences and everything we know about him. Am I saying that every single thing about Anakin and Padme's relationship was perfect? No. What I am saying is that Hayden was most likely told to act and deliver his lines like that. The character was deliberately written that way, and Hayden's performance perfectly reflects all of the awkwardness that the character should have at that point. People also make fun of the "I killed them all" scene, which I honestly thought was brilliant. The awkwardness is still there, combined with the anger, the emotional instability, and the confusion at what he just did. It's extremely effective and one of Hayden's better moments in the trilogy. Point being, he understood the assignment, and there's no reason to believe the character should be anything different in that point in his life. I think this would be a good time to talk about the 2003 Clone Wars micro-series briefly, the version of the Clone Wars that I grew up with, and still consider it canon in my head regardless of what Disney says. This show highlights Anakin's impulsiveness and includes quite possibly my favorite lightsaber duel of all time, Anakin versus Asajj Ventress. I already made an entire video about that. Check it out if you're interested. But this battle is not only gorgeous from a technical standpoint, it is a huge turning point for Anakin's character arc as well, and says so much without any dialogue. Tartakovsky is the king of visual storytelling. Anakin is a bit hesitant in the beginning of the duel and loses the first half, but as it goes along, he embraces the dark side more and more. He becomes angrier and more aggressive, allowing the darkness to fully take over and lead him to a victory in the end. One of my favorite moments in Star Wars history. It never fails to give me chills. The scream he lets out after it happens is haunting. It is a huge step towards his turn to the dark side that you will miss if you only watch the movies. Of course, The Clone Wars, the longer show, added much more to his character as well, but that came out after Revenge of the Sith. This show came out between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, bridging the gap perfectly in so many ways, but especially with Anakin. It even shows the ceremony where he officially graduates from apprentice to knight. Had Anakin listened to Obi-Wan, he would have never been at that fight. It was a test from Palpatine, and Anakin passed with flying colors. There's even some really creepy foreshadowing in the cave before he faces another big test. This show did some really interesting stuff. Going along with that, Revenge of the Sith clearly portrays Anakin at a much different point in his life. He's calmer, more confident, but also more conflicted than ever. Hayden conveys all of that so well. If you ever need proof that Hayden Christensen is a good actor, just put aside the Lucas dialogue for a second and look at all of the emotion that he portrays with just his face. The best example of this is the Padme's ruminations scene. The haunting John Williams score, not a single line of dialogue, and yet Hayden is still able to convey so much. All of the bottled up fear, sadness, and conflict is right there on his face, without having to say anything. He convinced me of his turn in this scene alone. I want to dig a little bit deeper into this criticism that Anakin's turn wasn't earned. This has always been a strange criticism to me that, in my opinion, was one of the better parts of the prequels. They spend 3 movies building up to it. He has been consistently pushed away from the Jedi, belittled by his master, and told he is not ready to be a master himself. Palpatine has been whispering in his ear since he was a child, telling him exactly what he wanted to hear. He's special, he's made for more, and the Jedi are not appreciating his skill set. He watched his mom die in his arms after having nightmares about it. Then he starts having those same nightmares about his wife and will do whatever it takes to protect her. He hears from Palpatine, someone that he very much trusts at this point, that there may be a solution, but only if he embraces the dark side. Anakin was hesitant at first, even doing the right thing and telling Mace Windu about it. But when it came to it, he made a choice to save Palpatine and assisted in the death of Windu, one of the highest-ranking members of the Jedi Council in the process. What exactly was he supposed to do at that point? Go back to the Jedi and say, "Whoops, I accidentally killed one of our highest-ranking members." He had his come-to-God moment and did the wrong thing. There was no going back. After all of that, how can people say his turn was unearned? That is so baffling to me. I honestly think Hayden took his performance to the next level after the turn, and the second half of Revenge of the Sith is devastating. Of course, we all knew going in that this would be the one where we see Anakin become Darth Vader, but nothing could have prepared us for him killing younglings or force-choking Padme. So much anger, so much pain, so much sadness in everything that he does. He completely lost the plot and lost his wife and best friend in the process. His power corrupted him, and the kind, empathetic, albeit flawed person we knew as Anakin Skywalker was all but gone. It seemed, at least to me, that despite all of the horrible things he was doing, he didn't even fully believe what he was saying, but he had to justify what he was doing in his mind because there was no going back. That all comes from Hayden's performance and his ability to convey the whole spectrum of emotions. As stated, George Lucas isn't great with dialogue, but Natalie and Hayden's performances completely sell the heartbreak of that Mustafar scene. Padme realizing who Anakin has become, pulling away, then Anakin force-choking her, believing she had betrayed him, is legitimately one of the most gut-wrenching scenes in cinema history, in my humble opinion. As a kid, I could watch this movie every day. Not so much anymore. It's depressing, man, and it wouldn't hit nearly as hard if Hayden didn't deliver. Anakin had a very strained and complicated relationship with his master, Obi-Wan Kenobi. As stated, they were not a good fit to be master and apprentice, and Anakin was quite bitter that Kenobi was his master as opposed to Qui-Gon Jinn. They argued a ton, especially in the beginning. Obi-Wan lacked the patience and experience for Anakin's immaturity. Anakin didn't care for Obi-Wan's teachings, believing him to be too strict and critical. Obi-Wan was also a devout follower of the Jedi Code, something Anakin nor Qui-Gon cared for, another reason they would have been a much better match. Obi-Wan was a great Jedi, but not a very good teacher, especially for someone as erratic as Anakin. However, as time went on, their relationship evolved significantly. Anakin matured, Obi-Wan became more accustomed to being a master, and they grew a level of respect for each other and started getting along better. We first see this in Clone Wars. There is a bit of a time jump after Anakin is knighted. Things seem lighter between them. Then we see it much more so in Revenge of the Sith. They're more playful, their banter is great, and they are more on a level playing field. Anakin is no longer an apprentice, and they have more of a friendship as opposed to mentor-mentee relationship. Of course, Anakin killing Dooku was a huge red flag, but Obi-Wan was unconscious for that. There's no chance it happens if he's around. Likewise, Obi-Wan also could have prevented Anakin's turn, but he was off-planet for that. Palpatine made sure of it. In fact, their last interaction before everything went to hell was actually quite pleasant and cordial. The fact that things were going so well for them made the turn even more devastating. You really felt the
"You were my brother, Anakin! I loved you!"
line. They did truly care about each other. Anakin had a lot of faults, but not caring certainly wasn't one of them. For a while, Obi-Wan blamed himself for Anakin's fall, feeling that he failed as a master. To an extent, that is definitely true. I would say more so it was the fault of the Council for putting them together in the first place when Obi-Wan was clearly not ready for that. Even after fully transforming into Vader, physically and emotionally, Anakin still carried baggage from this relationship, up until the day he finally killed his former master, ridding himself of that baggage once and for all. Let's talk about Anakin's relationship with his other master, Sheev Palpatine. Palpatine was an absolute genius, manipulating Anakin slowly throughout the years to use him as a tool for his own sinister plans. Preying on all of his fears and insecurities, Palpatine got his claws in Anakin from the jump.
We will watch your career with great interest.
Their relationship developed throughout the years, and Palpatine became a mentor of sorts, almost replacing what Qui-Gon would have been. It's crazy how changing just one influence can completely alter the course of someone's life. Those two guys were on complete opposite ends of the spectrum. There was an emotional hole there to be filled, and Palpatine did not hesitate to fill it. He became one of the few people Anakin could trust, and brilliantly played on his wavering faith in the Jedi and placating to his fragile ego at every step. Had the Jedi been more empathetic and understanding towards Anakin, this would have never worked. Like with everything else, Palpatine really took his time turning Anakin, not jumping right into it and waiting for the right moment, slowly planting the seeds throughout the years. He waited till Anakin fully trusted him to casually bring up the story of Darth Plagueis and the notion of potentially saving Padme with the power of the dark side, putting Anakin into a corner and forcing him to make the decision that Palpatine knew he would make. By the time Anakin turned, he was fully under the wing of Palpatine, though he became so powerful, in fact, that he floated the idea of overthrowing Palpatine, and he likely would have succeeded had he not gotten horribly burned on Mustafar. The Revenge of the Sith video game that I used to play on PS2 all the time actually shows that happening in an alternative ending. If Star Wars ever does a what if series like Marvel did, that would be a very interesting avenue to explore. As we move into the era of the Empire, Anakin, now fully transformed into Darth Vader, remained loyal to the Emperor, despite Padme's death. It's not like he had a choice at that point. He couldn't turn back, and he was too weak to overthrow Palpatine. Though it's not like he didn't try. He constantly tried to recruit people against him, most notably his own son Luke. Likewise, Palpatine was always on the lookout for Vader's replacement, and also sought out Luke. This made for a very interesting relationship where the mutual respect is definitely there, but they play this cat and mouse game where they both know what each other is up to, but they pretend like they don't. This is best exemplified in The Empire Strikes Back, the one scene in the movie where the Emperor appears. Vader knows who Luke is, but pretends that he doesn't. Palpatine knows Vader knows who Luke is, but pretends that he doesn't. They both know that the other is trying to recruit Luke against them, but they pretend they don't. There are way more layers to that scene than meets the eye. Vader was a vicious enforcer committing mass genocide and taking his pain and anger out on the Jedi and Rebel Alliance. Having nothing left to live for, he had nothing left to tether him to any sense of reality or humanity.
He's more machine now than man, twisted and evil.
He often killed his own Imperial officers when they failed him as a demonstration of power and to keep everyone in line. He was too far gone, hell-bent on causing as much pain and destruction as possible to, in his mind, bring order to the galaxy through fear. Killing his former master Obi-Wan was almost like killing off any ties he still had to his former life. Vader was an extremely intimidating presence, striking fear into everyone he came across, enemies and underlings alike. The suit, the breathing, the voice, the mask to hide all of his pain, the ruthlessness, and unforgiving nature. He was the perfect boogeyman, an unstoppable force like Jason Voorhees or the shark from Jaws. Effective for audiences at the time, yet they had no idea what was underneath all of that. However, the discovery of the existence of his son Luke changed Vader and was the cause of much conflict and regret. He almost saw him as a way out of this life, or at least a way to finally rid himself of Palpatine. While in A New Hope, Vader was strictly business, the boogeyman enforcer that he had become, killing Obi-Wan as previously mentioned. We see a clear change in his demeanor in The Empire Strikes Back when he discovers Luke. Don't get me wrong, he's still incredibly ruthless in Empire and even more determined than ever, but instead of just keeping order, he has a new motive, to try and find his son, to try to recruit him against Palpatine. This obsession clouds his vision, and we see this even more so in Return of the Jedi. Vader is genuinely unsure of what he wants to do anymore, and we slowly see pieces of the old Anakin Skywalker creeping out throughout the movie. Despite being completely covered in his suit and not being able to see any facial expressions, we can still see the conflict in his body language, and we can certainly hear it in James Earl Jones' voice.
It is too late for me, son.
Like his turn to the dark side, Anakin's redemption is absolutely earned, and by earned I don't mean it absolves him of all of the responsibility for the countless atrocities that he committed. He massacred millions of people, including children. There is no rectifying that. So in that sense, he doesn't exactly deserve redemption. But the point is that it's never too late to do the right thing, and that they properly built up to it. We established in Empire that he is not just a mustache-twirling villain. They hint many times throughout Return of the Jedi that he may be conflicted. He denies it, but we, and Luke, can tell. And similar to his decision to interfere in Revenge of the Sith, he also had a come-to-God moment here. One last chance to make things right, and this time, he did the right thing. He turned on his longtime master to save his son. Anakin was still in there, and he finally shone through in the end, sacrificing himself in the act. This was a full circle moment for Anakin and a perfect end to his character arc. No matter what he had done, no matter how far he had gone, there was still good in him. He just needed the right person to bring it out. And I'm not fully saying that this makes up for everything that he did. It definitely didn't, but it was meaningful and allowed his soul to rest, and he became a Force ghost. And finally, let's get to the question everyone always asks about villains. Why is he that way? Is it nature or nurture? Was Anakin destined to be evil? Was he born that way? Or were there a series of events and experiences that all contributed to that outcome? I think I've made it pretty clear in this video that it is mostly, if not all, the latter. I don't think there is any evidence that Anakin was born to become a Sith. Sure, he was born with immense power in the Force, but I don't think that makes him at all predisposed to turning evil. It just makes him more dangerous if he does. But all the potential in the world was there for him to use it for good as well. It all just depends on where his life took him. Anakin is very much a product of the circumstances he was born into, his upbringing, and his environment. Being born a slave certainly wasn't a good start. That'll certainly put a chip on your shoulder. He always dreamt of a better life, was extremely ambitious, and felt his talents weren't being put to good use. For the first 9 years of his life, his mother was the only positive relationship he had, and she was a great mother, but that's far from ideal. When he had to leave her in pursuit of that better life, he sought out a replacement for that companionship. It should have been Qui-Gon, but he died a few days later. It certainly wasn't going to come from the other Jedi, especially not Obi-Wan. His relationship with Padme was unhealthy and doomed from the start. He was not emotionally equipped for that. All of these factors made him vulnerable to manipulation and easy prey for Palpatine. So yeah, in the case of Anakin Skywalker, I definitely lean towards nurture. So many things went wrong in his life, starting with being born a slave. And that is not to absolve him of any of the agency or say that he didn't have a choice. If that's what you're taking from this, you are completely misunderstanding me. He did ultimately decide to do the wrong thing, but there were a lot of factors that led to that and things that could have hypothetically gone differently in a different timeline. Every single thing that happens in someone's life, especially at a young age, contributes heavily to the person they ultimately become and the choices they make down the line. If you tweak how some of these events transpire, there is a very good chance things could have turned out differently. Had he been born into different circumstances, there is a world of possibilities. But I guess we'll never know. Fascinating concept to think about, though. In conclusion, Anakin Skywalker is one of the greatest fictional characters ever created. We get to see him at so many different points in his life, how he evolves throughout, and how his relationships evolve throughout. He starts off as a bright-eyed, ambitious, extremely talented kid, stuck in the life as a slave. He finally gets the way out that he always wanted, becoming a Jedi, but the fear of loss and abandonment follows him everywhere he goes, as does the immense pressure to live up to the prophecy, neither of which he was capable of dealing with. Anakin is an extremely emotional person, but he was never taught how to handle those emotions. He cares about people and has a tendency to form attachments. First, it was his mother, then after her death, which devastated him, it became Padme. The same fear of losing Padme and the dreams that accompanied that fear, along with poor guidance from the Jedi, the one Jedi who understood him, dying, and the grooming from Palpatine, ultimately led to Anakin's turn to the dark side. Due to Anakin's emotional instability and wavering faith in the Jedi, Palpatine's job was relatively easy, especially considering how patient he was. That's not to absolve Anakin of any responsibility himself, but there were many unfortunate factors that went into his turn. When he lost Padme through his own actions, he went fully off the deep end, letting his anger and pain fuel him in his crusade to kill as many people as possible to keep the Empire's grip on the galaxy, killing his former master to cut any ties to the past. Luckily for him and the universe, he had a son who was cause for hesitation and conflict and was at the last minute able to turn Vader back. He is a good person at heart, always willing to lend a helping hand. He risked his life in a pod race to help total strangers, then goes to Geonosis to save his master, and even cared about each and every clone trooper. Had Anakin had someone teach him how to handle his emotions instead of suppress them, he could have turned out much better. In the end, the real Anakin came back out, a very bittersweet conclusion to his arc. The guy had an insanely tough life, growing up as a slave, losing his mother, losing his wife, not having a proper mentor, and being manipulated by the most sinister man in the galaxy. There is a reason everyone talks about Darth Vader as one of the greatest villains ever, and in my opinion, the prequels only made him more interesting, adding context and layers to how and why he became so evil and bitter. Anakin Skywalker's story is timeless, and his legacy will live on until the end of time, both in the real world and in the Star Wars universe. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Likes are so important for growing YouTube channels. Drop your thoughts on Anakin Skywalker in a comment down below, and let me know which other villains or characters in general you want to see me analyze. I have a super long list, but I'm always open to more suggestions. Check out my Patreon for further benefits, and stay tuned for some more fun content. I will see you soon. May the Force be with you.